URC folks, Leinster and the Stormers 36 points to 12. I thought maybe with all the guys Leinster have got out preparing for the Six Nations, the Stormers might be able to push this one a bit closer. But no, it's a big old bonus point win for Leinster. And the conditions were pretty rough. There was some line-out woes in this game. There was some drop ball in this game. There were a lot of scrums, a lot of penalties. But Leinster did have this phase from that 58th minute try where they just kind of cut the Stormers to bits. And I think they'll be pretty happy. Dan Sheehan back in action, getting some good minutes under his belt. Likewise, James Lowe ahead of the Six Nations too. So lots to like from them. If you're a Stormers fan, I think you'd be pretty disappointed. Leinster is unbeaten in all competitions thus far, so this was never going to be anything but an uphill battle. But yeah, losing Marnie Libbok I don't think helped, given that the bench only had the two backs on it. But we'll go through some of the key events and the stats, and you guys can let us know your thoughts. Like I mentioned, the conditions seem pretty rough, which I think led to a lot of errors. First points of the game went to Ross Byrne, who actually kicked pretty well. That guy gets a lot of stick, but he shifted the ball around the right. He did drop one pass from Geordie Barrett later on in the game, which was kind of a little bit low, which Geordie Barrett kind of gave him a bit of a dirty look about. But Ross Byrne played all right, kicked his goals, including a first penalty from a penalty at the breakdown, so 3 points to nil. Leinster had started the game with a 50-22, so they started with a bit of a hiss and a roar. They won the first scrum penalty as well. The scrums went both ways. By the end of the game, Leinster were winning scrum penalties for fun, but throughout the game it kind of shifted back and forth. But the Stormers just had no ball, and there was just at times a comedy of errors. I wrote down at least one phase you had the Stormers conceding a penalty at the breakdown, Leinster overthrowing at the line-out. From that overthrown line-out, Joseph Dweba, who tried to scramble on the loose ball, knocked it on. And then from the resulting scrum, we had at least one reset. So it was just, what am I watching? Got up at 6 o'clock in the morning for this. But no, the game did improve. Leinster did finally get the phases going when they could actually click. They looked sharp. You got the ball shifted from left side of the paddock to the right. You got guys like Geordie Barrett, who played well again. Good to see him playing out with the kind of Leinster youngsters alongside Snyman as well. But yeah, Geordie Barrett, who they called Geordie Murphy as well, which kind of caught me by surprise. But yeah, Geordie Barrett, aka Geordie Murphy, to Andrew Osborne. First try of the game, and then it's 10 points to nil. So Leinster are looking pretty good. They've had basically all the play. The Stormers' first chance down Leinster's end took about 15 minutes to come, and Famark ended up knocking it on. So it didn't seem like much was going to go right for them. But then we had the reverse of the kind of Dweba knock-on from a Leinster overthrow, when you had Sheehan knocking it on from a Stormers overthrow. More line-out time, more scrum time, and then the Stormers scrum won a couple of back-to-back penalties, gets them a bit of territorial pressure, and then their hands finally stick too. So both these teams do have some skills in them when the conditions allow. Libbok to Gallant to Loader out on the right wing. Try time converted 10 points to 7. 10 points to 7 is back to being game on. Leinster put in a bit of a nothing kick to Libbok, which he was looking to kind of shimmy out of some play, which was dangerous. You got to be careful kicking to that man. But then also Sheehan charged down Libbok not too later, so you need to be careful of Dan Sheehan. Like, geez, did he look happy to be back out on a rugby field and like starting and captain. So yeah, very, very pleasing from that point of view. But lots of penalties conceded. Breakdown was messy. Lineouts were messy. And there weren't that many guys able to show off their skills in the first stanza of the game. Gallant at one point had a nice left-footed kick under a bit of pressure. He had an offload under a bit of pressure, which created a nice kind of half break. He won a turnover. So that was at least looking sharp. But then both sides lost players to injuries. Well, Liam Turner went off for Leinster. Luke McGrath went off for Leinster on a stretcher, but he gave the thumbs up, so hopefully he's all good. Marnie Libbok went off, as I mentioned. That's maybe one of the big game changes for the Stormers, given that they didn't have a replacement proper 10 lined up. I don't know, it just looked a bit messy once he went off, and JD Schickerling went off as well. So the injury list was lengthy. But Leinster scored one last try before half-time. And it was the fullback Macklin to Barrett to Lowe. And then Dan bloody Sheehan out on the left wing. Something about that guy. I just love seeing him out in the wide channels. He's got, we had it with Dane Coles back when he was playing with the All Blacks. Ireland have got it with Dan Sheehan, and so do Leinster. He's just got that pace and the skill set to do that role, and he makes it look really good. Not converted, but 15 points to 7. I think Leinster have been pretty good value for their lead. They've had 62% possession and territory. They've had 10 defenders beaten to 4. But there's been 11 scrums, many of them reset. Both the lineouts are operating in the 70s in terms of the percentage, which is pretty dire. There's been 9 turnovers conceded by the Stormers, 7 by Leinster. So Leinster's been a bit more skillful in terms of not dropping the ball as much. Like the Stormers have had less ball and dropped more of it. And the penalty count's 6 to 7. So I wouldn't say it's been the easiest on the eye half of rugby, but again, given the conditions, you've still seen a couple of nice tries both ways. Second half continues with a lot of Leinster pressure. The hands do let them down early, but the Stormers eventually get a bit of a warning for too many penalties conceded. Dweber eventually ends up getting them out of jail with a nice penalty one at the breakdown, and then Nithling Fushi probably... it's always hard because I'm not a medical expert, but that dude's face looked in a bad way. He had a big old head-on-head contact, or at least contact to his head when making a tackle, and his face had blood on it and looked pretty tender. I would have thought if he's in that kind of shape, and they had to stop the game for him for a while as he recovered, maybe just check him out. Precautionary. Stayed on the field, which was bizarre because, as I said, his face looked pretty messed up, but he didn't go off for an HIA. Another yellow card warning not too long later for the Stormers guys, and eventually Leinster were able to crack them. The Stormers defence had been holding pretty desperately for a while, but 5-metre tap, Leinster, for God's sake, don't go for the lineouts, right? The lineouts have been rough, but 5-metre tap, keep the phases low, keeping it to Jordie Barrett, who takes the ball over to the line really low to the ground. Limit the phases, limit the lineouts, and you get a try from it. So 22 points to 7. It's pretty much game over, isn't it? Then you get Dan Sheehan from a James Lowe cross kick. That one is a proper thing of beauty try. So 29-7. Sheehan did so well to just stay onside. He checked himself just to make sure he was behind Lowe when he made the kick. So perfectly executed. James Lowe looked to have scored one himself, but there was a knock-on in the tackle from Deegan, which caused a turnover ball, which ended up getting TMO'd, so unfortunate for James Lowe. He didn't look to be running at full tilt, so maybe he thought it was also going to be knock-on, but anyway. Leinster scrum by that point is also absolutely dominant. They're winning penalties for fun. Andrew Osborne gets a second as Leinster are just piling on the points by this point. Like the Stormers put in some proper desperate tackles, and they finally got the ball off Leinster only to just gift it to Andrew Osborne with an intercept pass. So 36-7. It's looking pretty tough reading for the Stormers guys. They did get the final try of the game though. Schoolyard rules. Last try wins. Anybody? Well, they actually started chucking the ball around a bit. The Stormers. They actually finally got some ball in the final 10 minutes. They looked all right. Like they had some nice plays. Galant and Zas got themselves into some space, but 78 minutes, they got one from a maul. Evan Roos was able to finish it off, but yeah, it's all just to kind of make the scoreline look a bit more respectable for the Stormers because they don't get anything out the game. Leinster, 57% possession, 65% territory, controlled that thing pretty well. Defenders beaten 17-13. Clean breaks is actually 6-5 to the Stormers. So the Stormers did have those moments, but often let down by handling and whatnot. Turnovers conceded 16-10. That is the Stormers with the bigger of those numbers. So execution just not there. Lineouts improved slightly, 82% and 80% for Leinster and the Stormers respectively. It's still pretty low, but the first half was worse. The penalty count is where it also gets pretty horrendously bad for the Stormers. They conceded 17 to Leinster's 8. So yeah, when you double your opponent's penalty count, you know you're in pretty hot water. Jordie Barrett, 7 defenders beaten. Ben Loader had a couple of clean breaks for the Stormers. Evan Roos made 17 tackles. Max Deegan, 16 carries. Dan Sheehan gets man of the match with his couple of tries. Great to see him back. As I said, just got a proper X Factor skill set that a lot of hookers don't have. He can do the stock standard stuff and then put the kind of icing on the cake with those plays out wide and, checking his run for a kick from a cross kick and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Leinster certainly take that. As I said, good to see the depth of the squad doing well for them, and good to see guys like Sheehan and Lowe get some minutes under the belt. Stormers, yeah, that's a rough one. The handling was poor. The scrum was getting pinged. Would have liked to. I wasn't even hoping for a win really either way, but I was hoping for the Stormers to get a bit closer. What can I say? You guys let us know your thoughts on the game. I'm off to watch another one. But, take care of yourselves and talk to you again soon. See you later.